Hello, everybody. Welcome to our closing keynote. We've made it through a really great day. So as you're joining us in our last session, if you want to put in your name, where you're from, your LinkedIn into the chat, we'd love to know a little bit more about who's out there. And I am going to quickly hand off so that you can get all of the wisdom in the time we have left in, again, what's been a really great day. So first of all, thanks to all of you for showing up and engaging, asking great questions. And I know there's even been networking going on in Google Sheets. It's been awesome. I am going to hand off my intro to Ron Harpass, the founder and CEO of Lettuce, to tell you a little bit more about who we are and give you background, and then he'll hand it off to Paul. So Ron, all yours.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, everybody. This has been quite a day. I've been in and out of all of the sessions, watching the chat, seeing your questions, the aha moments, the networking. You know, this is phenomenal to watch. This is why we built this summit. This is why we built Lettuce. This is why we want to bring all of you together. It's so exciting to see it all, become real. And then, thank you for investing a full day in yourself and your business. I know it's not trivial. You're all busy. You all have a lot to do. This is a big deal. It's a big investment, and I want to make sure that you get the most out of it. Reminder, as a solo, you don't have to think of that. You don't have to believe that you have to stay small. I've believed this for many years. Independence is the future. It's not a fallback. It's not a plan B. I'm looking at all the solopreneurs I talk to and everyone who comes to, work with Lettuce. There is a fundamental shift that I see in the market. And for many years, when you talk about entrepreneurship, it was about scale. How many people you hire, how much money you raise, how do you get big really quickly? And then, people who were taking the solo approach, it was always considered, you're freelancing. It's a phase. That's not where we are today. That's not where the future is about. And, you could see this in the numbers. There are more than 73 million independent workers in the US. More than 5.5 million of them are already making six-figure income, 100K or more per year. And that number has doubled in the last 5 years. So it's very clear that this is not a phase, this is not a gig, this is not something that people do because they don't have any other option. It's real. And when I'm talking to all of you and seeing the activity that's happening on the Lettuce platform and off the Lettuce platform, it's very clear that solos are not just surviving, successful. You guys are thriving, and you're building sophisticated businesses. You're landing major clients. I can see people proving that you don't need a team of 50 or even 10 to create something meaningful. And AI is there to amplify what a single person can do. And I see solos competing at levels that were impossible to imagine just a few years ago. And that's awesome to watch. You all are happier and healthier and more secure. And it's not a compromise to go solo. It's a choice. And increasingly, I can say it's the smart choice. Now, there's a problem. The infrastructure around us hasn't caught up. The infrastructure that's driving the economy and supporting everything that we do is not up to par with where we solos need it to be. And what I mean by that is that the systems around us were built for W2 employees, for big corporations. Their financial tools were designed to allow these corporations to do what they wanted to do. And the advice was always about how do you go big? And that gap between the infrastructure, the systems, the environment, And what you're doing as solos is costing you. It's costing you time and money, and I see anxiety. It's costing you peace of mind. I see solos who regularly make $200,000, $300,000 a year, very successful, still managing their business, their taxes, their books in spreadsheets. They're still unsure if they should incorporate and be an S Corp or not. They still spend their weekends, their nights on reconciliation, on tracking receipts. I don't think any of you went to be a solo to become an accountant or a bookkeeper or a spreadsheet master. That's not the reason you decided to go into solo business. You didn't want to spend your weekends tracking invoices and comparing receipts and closing the books. You didn't want to spend time asking GPT, is this the right time for an S Corp? I'm unsure. What does it mean? Am I going to be safe? You wanted to go into being a solo because you have a passion and you're great at something. And that something is what you should spend time on. And that's why we built Lettuce. First of all, as you all know, and you heard it a number of times, we have built Lettuce by solos for solos. Most of the team here at Lettuce are actually solos themselves. Designers, marketers, product people, engineers, almost every single thing you can think about. We have people on the team who are solos, passionate solos, building so that we can bring it for you and drink our own champagne along the way. And therefore, we've been where you are. We know both sides of the journey. We know what's important. And we know how to do this in a way that's really focused on giving you back the peace of mind and the time to do what you want to do. And that's also why we created this summit, the Solo Summit, so that you could get all of those tools available to you and make the right choices. And the reason we built Lettuce is that we really believe that the future is independent, and that at some point everybody's going to be solo in some way or another. And you need to have the financial systems, the infrastructure in place to let you play at that level of professionalism that you do with everything else. And we're not just about making sure that you pay the right amount of taxes. We take care of your entity setup and compliance management. We worry about invoicing and make sure that you get paid. We definitely take care of your books and your invoices and your receipts. We take care of your taxes all year long, not just at tax day. And we have the Lettuce Bag Guarantee, making sure that we are on the hook, we are responsible, so that you can go and do what you're great at. And there are a bunch of things that you have to do. And we want to make sure that we are building everything in support of you running your business like a pro. So we are planning to start working on things that go beyond compliance and taxes and accounting, definitely in areas of operations, as I mentioned, invoicing and contracts and CRM, and then benefits. We want to help you find the right retirement plan and connect you with a financial planner. And we just announced that we're going to go into benefits and healthcare and make sure that you have everything you need so that being solo would feel financially safe and the right choice and sustainable for everybody who's around you. And the technology is available. We're bringing it to the market in a way that's easier to consume than ever before. The reason I pause for a second and talk about benefits is that 42% of freelancers don't have health insurance. That's not okay. Healthcare shouldn't be a luxury. It should be something that you have and that you have at a very good level. So we're going to make it happen. It's part of the Lettuce promise. And that would be part of making sure that going solo feels financially safe, sustainable, and you could plan on doing this for the rest of your career. And what we want you to do is be the CEO of your business. Make strategic decisions, serve your clients, do what's right for your team. And you deserve a team behind you that would run the back office. Like a CEO of a corporate that has a whole team running the back office for them. You need to be in the front doing what matters for the business and for your clients. Let us worry about the rest. That's what we build the system for. That's what we want to do for you every single day. Be that back office that supports your business. Now, it's very well known that strategy without systems to support it is just an aspiration. Aspirations are good, but they're not enough. We want you to make sure that you put the systems in place to enable that strategy to become a reality. So with that in mind, we have somebody who's really, really good at this. So our closing keynote speaker for today has lived this at the very highest level. Paul Shirley has been an NBA basketball player. That's top notch. Played at the Chicago Bulls and the Phoenix Suns and Atlanta Hawks. And after doing all of that, he's also the author of 6 books, including The Process is the Product. And he's the founder of The Process, helping entrepreneurs defeat the distractions and do deeply focused work. And with all of that set of credibility, Paul is going to show you how to build a process that works. So as you get ready to listen, start thinking about what will you build in 2026. Next year is coming. We're here to support you. Start planning for the future. Please join me in welcoming Paul Shirley.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me in. I also want to say thank you to Lisa. How about a little round of applause for Lisa for all of her work today? And I would be remiss if I didn't give a little love to the man who introduced Lisa and me. That's Brett Trainer. He actually runs a cool little group called the Corporate Escapee. And I wouldn't be here without Brett, fellow Iowa Stater, putting me in touch with Lisa. Last, I want to say thanks to all of you for taking the time. I was thinking about all of this as I led in today, and it's not me being falsely modest to say that it's really is a joy to get to talk about this stuff, right? To have an audience of people who are interested in managing their own ability to get stuff done and achieve great things. I want to give you a little context, because I think when we're doing stuff that's virtual, there can be this context collapse. Like, who is this guy? Why am I here? Where is he? I'm in Denver, Colorado. I'm actually at the workspace that is called The Process. Behind me, a few people are actually sitting and working right now. They started a session about 15 minutes ago. We will stop them after 90 minutes, put them into small groups, get them talking to each other about what they worked on, with the goal of helping them not only focus, but break these huge projects, whether they're creative or entrepreneurial, into manageable bits. Ron told you a little bit about me and my history. I think the reality here is that if I had just played professional sports, I might be able to talk to you about this idea of systems and focused work. But where things get interesting, I think, is because I then went on to write books. And not only that, I started to see that lots and lots of people were struggling with this task of being able to sit, get stuff done, and that it was really lonely. One of the things that I care about quite a lot is not only helping people get stuff done, but also helping them connect to other people who are trying to get stuff done, which is really germane here, because that's what we're all doing. We're here to try to connect to other people who are fighting this fight of entrepreneurship and accomplishment. So with that, I want to tell you a little bit about the context or the lens through which I see this idea of not only focused work, but the systems we can build so that we can sit and get the difficult stuff done. This is what I see people going through. I see people who are bombarded by all of this chaos, all of this noise that's coming at them. And I like this phraseology of liquid modernity, because it's not just that we have all of this stuff coming at us. it's changing all the time. We're never aware from day to day which social media platforms are we going to have to use, which forms of communication are going to be up and around the bend, which kinds of AI slop are going to be coming at us, distracting us from what we want to actually do that day. And I sympathize because that stuff is hard. Here's what I think of when I think of our ability to carve out time so that we can focus and do all of this stuff that we need to do. I think of Jon Snow taking on an army. For me, I look at this through the lens of basketball. I'm going to share with you a clip now. This clip is pretty old, so you're going to see a lot of standard definition. I'm going to look a lot younger, and this will give us a way into this idea of building systems for focused work.
The other end.
If you're Iowa State, do you throw long here?
Well, you can throw long. I think that is your second option. You'd like to come in short and get it in the hands of one of your guards so he can dribble and stay away from the foul.
Okay, I keep using the word context, but I'm going to beat that to death. Here is the context for the situation we're in. I played college basketball at Iowa State University. The game that we are watching a snippet of in standard definition is a game that we are playing at the University of Kansas. In this game, you can see that we are ahead by 1 point with 1.5 seconds to go. Now let's continue the action, as it were.
You want to stay away from that long pass. A lot of bad things can happen to that.
You could turn it over.
You know, if you turn it over, throw it out the other end, it comes back out underneath your basket. So try to get the short pass if you can.
They're going to throw long to Paul Shirley. He made the catch. He's fouled. And the clock shows 0.7 of a second to play. Iowa State leading by 1. They will send Paul Shirley to the line, the young man who grew up about 50.
Okay, a little more context. So as the legendary Kansas announcer Fred White just mentioned, I'm that guy. And I grew up about 20 miles from Allen Fieldhouse, which is where the University of Kansas plays. Now, stay with me. I'm playing for Iowa State. We are playing against Kansas, which is not how this was supposed to go, and which is why this game is particularly meaningful to me. So I grew up at the intersection of 2 gravel roads near Meriden, Kansas. I learned to play basketball on the gravel driveway behind my parents' house, shooting outside on this hoop that was attached to the deck on the back of that house. And like many kids growing up in Kansas, I thought if I got good enough, someday I would get to play at KU, which is what we call the University of Kansas. But that didn't make me very different from lots of kids, except that then I did get pretty good. And I also grew quite a lot. Ron and I were joking that it's hard for you to understand the totality of my being, what with me being 6'9" on just a camera. So I was getting offers to go play college basketball, but I'd always dreamed of playing at KU. So then when the call came from Kansas's assistant, a guy named Matt Doherty, that head coach Roy Williams wanted to talk to me, I basically got a little 17-year-old boner. And when that erection had subsided, my parents and I went over to Allen Fieldhouse and met with Roy Williams to talk about me potentially playing at Kansas. We walked into his office. There was thick carpet and a big desk and all sorts of trophies on the wall. And in that office, where I thought we were going to talk about me potentially playing at Kansas, Roy Williams proceeded to destroy my dreams and say, I think you should go to this small school called Davidson because you're not good enough to play in the Big 12, which is the league that both Iowa State and Kansas were in. So I staggered out of Roy Williams' office and had this decision to make. Would I go to Davidson, which was this small school in North Carolina that people didn't know about? It's where Steph Curry ended up playing, but back then nobody knew what Davidson was. Or I could go to Iowa State, where technically I would be a walk-on. I was actually a national merit scholar, not that anybody knew that at the time. Davidson was great because it was a small private school. The girls were pretty, and they did all the laundry of all the students there, which I thought was pretty amazing. But they were nowhere near the League of Kansas. And if I went to Davidson, I wouldn't have my chance at retribution. So I went off to Iowa State. My freshman year, didn't play a ton. Sophomore year, played a lot, but we were bad. And then in the game that we are about to tap back into, I'm a junior, and now I'm pretty good. And I'm about to go to the free throw line with a chance to seal a win at Allen Fieldhouse, this place where I, growing up, saw all sorts of legends play and where I wanted to play myself. What I need to do next is I need to make the first free throw and then I need to miss the second free throw for reasons that we will get into here in a second. But let's see what happens way back then.
15 miles from Lawrence, will go to the line for Iowa State.
And has played his best basketball of the season against Kansas and Kansas State. Now, Larry Eustace set that play. They never looked for that short pass. It was the home run ball all the way.
Shirley on the line, 7/10 of a second to play. Iowa State up 1. Shirley tonight, 3 for 6 at the line. Big, very, very big.
Okay, so kudos to me. I made the first free throw, which was no small accomplishment. And now I need to miss this second free throw.
Paul Shirley now with 12 points, 7 rebounds. It's a 2-point lead.
Oh, by the way, that's my mom. So my mom was in Roy Williams' office that day with me. I also neglected to mention that both of my parents went to the University of Kansas. So my mom sat in the office while Roy Williams told her oldest son that he wasn't good enough to play at Kansas. So right now, what is happening is that there are 15,800 people inside Allen Fieldhouse, and all of them, except for my mother, are cheering for me to screw this up somehow. Let's see what happens next. Remember, my job here is to miss this second free throw because as soon as the ball hits the rim and then somebody's hands, time starts, and that prevents any chaos from happening. And we win at Allen Fieldhouse, which is kind of a big deal.
With 7/10 of a second, Kansas has time to catch it and shoot it if they can hit an open man with the inbounds pass or get the rebound and throw. Not a bad miss right there. And Iowa State has the win. Michael Nurse came up with the rebound, and Iowa State has up.
Okay, so we won the game, but this is leaving me with something of a quandary because amidst all of this confusion after the game, I need to decide what am I going to say to Roy Williams? Because remember, he broke my heart back in his office 3 years before this. And so there's all this madness around the court, as there always is. There's security guards trying to keep crazy people from coming onto the court, and the players are milling about, and there's cameras from ESPN or whomever. And in this moment, as I'm weighing, what am I going to do with Roy Williams? I'm thinking to myself, do I go over and just like flip him off? Do I calmly mouth a quick little fuck you? Like, what do I do? Well, what happens is his eyes find my eyes like the Kennedy bullet crossing a group of people. And in that moment, he knows what he once said to me, and I know what he once said to me, and that is enough. But our point here is not actually revenge and retribution. As sweet as that felt at the time, it also felt pretty sweet that we beat Kansas the next 3 times that we played them and won the Big 12 back-to-back times. And la, 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 la. We can talk about that later. The point here is what I was going through when I was standing at that free throw line and how similar that is to what we're all managing right now. So when I was standing at that free throw line, those 15,799 people, exception being my mother, all wanted me to screw up. They all wanted me to not be able to focus, right? So what I had to do was hearken back to something that a coach at Bob Chipman's basketball camp in Topeka, Kansas had once taught me, which was that when you're going to shoot a free throw, no matter where you are, you come up with the same ritual. For me, that ritual was I took 2 dribbles, I took a breath, I blocked out everything around me, and I shot the free throw. And this, I think, is eerily similar to what we're all going through. Those 15,799 fans are like all of the distractions coming at us all the time. And we need to be able to turn ourselves from the Maxell guy into Jon Snow. And I think this begs a question, which is, why is this so hard? Because fundamentally, it doesn't seem like it should be difficult to sit still and concentrate on the pitch deck you need to build, the copy you need to write, that difficult email you need to send. After all, it's just sitting there, isn't it? Well, not so fast, I would say. The first reason that it's hard is that this stuff is super new to us. For most of prehistory, we were hunters and gatherers, and we were wandering around like trying to throw spears at mammoths. Then like 12,000 years ago, we discovered or invented agriculture. And then a couple hundred years ago, along came the Industrial Revolution. And those might seem different, but they're also pretty easy for our brains to make sense of. We either killed the mammoth or we didn't. We either plowed the field or we didn't. We either built the widget or we didn't. And then around 60 years ago, work changed for a lot of us. It moved from us working with our backs to us working with our brains, which a lot of people, including the legendary economist and thinker Peter Drucker, called knowledge work. That's what a lot of us are doing as entrepreneurs. We need to do this difficult cognitive labor. The other thing that is consistent with this labor is that it's often project-based. So we moved from a world of all of our history that was mostly operations. Go kill the mammoth, go farm the field, go build the widget, to now being given the assignment either by ourselves or somebody else of, you've got this project that's due a long time from now. How are you going to break that into bits? And that is hard for our brains because it's so new. We're also not really built for this kind of thing. As I mentioned, we have existed for a very long time, and we evolved to basically be these hyper-skilled threat detection devices. In most of antiquity, we were worried about, is there a lion over there? Is there a crazy tribesman who wants to come take our daughters? Is there a storm coming around the bend? And that caused us to get really good at, like I said, detecting threats. It made it really hard for us to sit still, for us to block out all of this noise and do something that is cognitively difficult because we're just not built for it. The other reason this is hard is that companies have figured this out about us. They know that we're easily distractible. They know that it's hard for us to sit still. And so anytime you sit down to try to focus, you're being bombarded by temptation. All of these things that are tripping a trigger in your brain that is saying, like, go take care of that. There's a threat nearby, whether that threat is real or perceived. As you can see on the screen, I've picked 4 companies whose 2024 revenue combined was $1.5 trillion. Well, the budget for the US military in 2024, which is the largest military in the history of the world, was about half that. So, and I'm not saying this to be hyperbolic. Each time you sit down and you're trying to do something difficult, something cognitively difficult, you're faced off with an army of coders and neuropsychologists and people that are trying to keep you from focus, that are financed by a budget that's twice as big as the US military, the largest military in the world, every time you try to do that. So then, how do we manage this? How do we actually do this focused work? How do we sit down and effectively do what I did in front of those 15,000 people and focus? There are lots of ways, but one of those is that we need to come up with rituals. In the same way that I needed to come up with that ritual on the free throw line, we need to come up with rituals so that we can focus for 20 minutes or 15 minutes or 25 minutes throughout our day and do this stuff that's really valuable to us. When I think of rituals, I think of the video game that's on your screen, which is called NBA Jam. And if you're old enough, I'm happy that you are and that you recognize what this is. In honor of Lisa, who once worked for the Seattle Supersonics, I found a clip with those Supersonics. So in NBA Jam, you might recall, if you ever played the game, that the way to do super cool dunks and to throw the ball really fast was to click the turbo button, which, if I remember correctly, on the Super Nintendo was the right trigger. That would allow you to throw the ball really hard or steal the ball or do sweet dunks like is shown here. That was the turbo button. When I think about building rituals so that we can focus, I think of us building these turbo buttons in our brains, figuring out ways that we can put ourselves into a state of focus so that we can do this difficult stuff. Now, you could make the case that this is like a flow state. There's a lot of talk of flow states, but I've found that it's difficult to always think about or to aspire to a flow state. Better to think about, how do I just get myself into this state of focus when I need to? There are some smarter people than I who've talked about how behavior works. A lot of them would agree that when you're trying to rebuild habits and rituals and routines, it's pretty simple. It's cue, behavior, reward. So if you want to have a certain behavior, you need to line up a cue into that behavior, and then you reward yourself after. A simple example would be, the cue is you're thirsty, the behavior is you drink water, the reward is you're no longer thirsty. Now, we can also reverse engineer these cue, behavior, reward intervals such that we can control that for ourselves. One of the things we could do, for example, would be light a candle when we need to focus. We could grab a certain kind of tea to cue us into that behavior. We could turn off our phone, get some tea, and light a candle if we need to. And then after we've spent 20 minutes or so working on this, we can reward ourselves with a piece of chocolate. Mostly what they will say is, I shouldn't need that. I'm a grown-up. I should just be able to gut my way through this. And I feel so much sympathy for those people, because what I've seen now working with people for so long with this is there's a great deal of guilt because people think I should just be able to make myself do this. The problem is, and again, smarter people than I have written and talked about this, certain of our behaviors are so ingrained by adulthood that it's not that we can't change them. It's just that it takes longer to change them. So in a lot of ways, we have to get even more childlike and turn these things into these little games for ourselves, ways to hew to that cue behavior reward interval that I talked about. Doing effectively what was for me in basketball, the 2 dribbles, the breath, the free throw, with my reward then being hopefully the ball goes through the basket. The second way to build systems so that you can focus, for my money, is training yourself to be aware of what works and what doesn't. So we are, as we've discussed, and as the world is discussed, living in a harem-scarum environment where it's really easy to shift through our days with so much speed that we forget to notice that we did the things that we care about. I talk a lot about in here at the process, the idea of 3 A's. We want to take action, we want to train awareness around the results of that action, and then we want to adapt. What I mean here is that it's not enough to just do the focusing. We also have to train ourselves to get better at getting into these periods of focus as we go, in the same way that I needed to evaluate, did that free throw go in? Did I miss 10 in a row? If so, I should probably change some things about the way that I'm shooting free throws. And similarly, that we are able to evaluate or become aware of how our focused work periods are going through the week. A simple example is this. So imagine if you've got a pitch deck that's due in 2 weeks and you decide, I think I can knock that out in 10 business days if I spend 20 minutes a day on that. So you lay out that you're going to start your mornings with 20 minutes on this pitch deck Monday through Friday. And then on Monday, you get really excited because you're in a state of focus, and then you actually do 40 minutes. Then Tuesday, you're completely depleted from what you did Monday, and you do 5 minutes. And then Wednesday, you recover and you do 17 minutes. And then Thursday, you get 13 minutes. And Friday, you get 12 minutes. Well, okay, don't punish yourself for that. Instead, become aware of how that went. And then on Saturday or Sunday, lay out a more realistic goal for the next week. Instead of saying, I'm a piece of shit because I did too much and then too little, think about what's actually reasonable. Is it going to be more reasonable to spend 15 minutes on that PowerPoint? Is it going to be reasonable to spend 20 minutes on Monday and then 15 minutes on Tuesday and then 20 minutes on Wednesday? Give yourself these experiments, and then at the end of the experiment, become aware of what actually worked and what didn't, such that you're then able to adapt for the future. So you're able to make these changes that make you better at doing this job of getting into a state of focus. Okay, last idea, which is maybe the most important, which is that you have to figure out why this matters to you. This is also kind of new. For much of our history, we had religion to pick up the slack when it came to our why. And some of you and some of us may still have religion to give us that cosmic pinball game of, if you hit this button, then you're going to go to heaven. If you hit that button, you're going to go to hell. But for a lot of us, we have to figure out, why do we want to do this? In the world of entrepreneurship, it's easy to get lost in the sauce of, I'm just working every day. Why am I actually doing this? Which makes it all the more important to remember that we have to figure out why this stuff matters. I actually had a phone call with a friend of mine just last night. He's a banker in Des Moines, and we were talking about why we do the things that we do. He, like I, is in his 40s, and he's thinking about the big questions of mortality as well. And we came back to this difficulty of asking yourself why, because it's such a big question. So for my money, the real trick is to find your way into your why, which is to connect to your values. What do you actually care about that gets you out of bed each day, that allows you to connect to the work that you're doing, which allows you to get excited about this entrepreneurial journey that you're on? And what I've found is that if you can connect to those values over the long haul, then you're able to come up with a why that will sustain you, that gives you reasons to do all of this focused work. And what I would say about that is that if you're able to do this, if you're able to build this ability to do this focused work over time, that you'll change from the Maxell guy, the guy who's blown back all the time by all of the distractions, all of the noise that's coming at us, and you'll turn yourself into Jon Snow. And what that means is that you can become a superhero. Because let's be honest, that visual, by the way, is from the movie Idiocracy. And right now we are living through something of a real life experiment, or a real life version of Idiocracy, where most people are allowing themselves to be destroyed by distractions. They're not able to build these periods of focused work. They're not able to connect to their values and think about building this ladder toward those values through these periods of focused work. And what that means is that by doing these pretty simple infrastructural modifications and changes, you can become effectively the smartest man in the world. Okay, now I want to know what's on your minds. And in order to get into that, I'd like to bring back Lisa, because here's what I've found. I can talk about this stuff all day, but it doesn't really matter if it doesn't resonate for you. So Lisa, what is on people's minds out there in the world when it comes to how we can apply this in the day-to-day?
It's pretty quiet right now.
Everybody left us.
I know.
That's enough.
Let me, first of all, thank you, Paul, for reminding me what it was like to work in the NBA and have no idea what might come out of a player's mouth.
You don't get to the NBA by being entirely predictable.
Even
right?
when you're well prepped. Let me ask you, are there certain parts of a process of like thinking about your values or finding the candle to turn on, which by the way, I have one turned on today, that people get stuck on the most? I mean, I think values would be hard, but sometimes then it's putting it into action. So if there's a pattern that you see.
I think the pattern I see so much is a sense of guilt and shame that this stuff is hard, that people think I should just be able to gut my way through it. As we have discussed, I write books, and in Los Angeles, I built out a space for writers that it developed in a very ad hoc way. So I had moved from a basketball career where in the midst of that basketball career, I actually wrote a book, right? So this is that book. It's called Can I Keep My Jersey? It was about what it's like to be a professional athlete. And so it seemed to me that the next step was pretty obvious. I would move to Los Angeles and be a writer. I quickly realized I didn't know what I was doing. And that's what led to this realization that, oh, wait, actually, I had pretty good training in this. The secret was to build these little bits, to build a process so I could do a little bit at a time, day after day. So as a part of that, I also noticed that there were lots of people like me that also in Los Angeles wanted to be able to build a writing career. So I built out this writing group. It started in a sandwich shop on Venice Boulevard once a week for 3 hours, and then it moved to a bagel place, and then it moved to a church's side room, and we kept growing and gathering momentum. So we eventually built out our own space. And one of my pet peeves was this. We would often bring in authors to talk about how they write. Or it was also not just authors, screenwriters. It was people who wrote for TV. And one of the things I hated was when somebody would say, yeah, I write for like 5 hours every day. And I'm like, no, you don't. That's a lie. Like what you're doing is you're sitting at your computer for 5 hours, but you're not actually writing. So I'm an idiot. I have my degrees in engineering. Like, why should I know how to write? Well, what I did figure out was you didn't have to do very much of it if you could just focus on it, right? So the most I will ever write is about 45 minutes at a time. I do that every day to start my day, 6 days a week. And yes, there's some difficulty when it comes to building that consistency, but it doesn't have to be 4 hours. And in reality, people can't concentrate for 4 hours. So there's lots of evidence that would suggest that the longest, in fact, we can concentrate is about 51 minutes, which is probably why our classes were about 50 minutes long when we were kids. In reality, even within that, it's probably something like 17 minutes. I've seen this. I've been running co-working spaces now for 12 years. Our sessions are an hour and a half, and you will always see that people will get up to go to the bathroom and to get more coffee after about 45 minutes. And even within those 45-minute bursts, really all they can do is focus for about 15 to 20 minutes. And yet we're telling people all the time that you should have to sit still for 4 hours or 8 hours or whatever, which is crazy. Like, it's just impossible. So back to your question, what I see a lot is people have this guilt around, like, God, I should just be able to sit here forever and do this stuff. And the answer is nobody can. A lot of people, in fact, are getting nothing done because they're so beating themselves up about how little they're doing that they're not even able to do the 15 minutes or the 20 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, that's me all day until like 4 to 7, which then when you have kids, that's kid time.
Right.
So you have to figure out a new process. Here's one. So when discovering your why, how do you go about experimenting to find what that is? Hold on, I got a pop up in front of it. And get to the point where it's crystal clear.
I don't think it's ever going to be crystal clear. I also think that we forget that time changes our why. You mentioned your kids, right, Lisa? So your why has probably changed because you have these children. It's different now than it was 20 years ago or whenever you had children. And we forget that and think that our why is going to stay the same throughout. So we also forget that sometimes our why may be something really utilitarian and seemingly ignoble, like, I just want to have enough money to take care of said kids, right? And that other times in our lives, we may be able to go to a why that's a little more aspirational, a little more conceptual, like, I want to help people, or I want to find my own personal improvement, or I want to have new experiences. But those things change over time, right? We are tempted to get stuck in the rut of thinking my values 5 years ago should be my values now. And that's not very realistic in my experience.
I think that's good. Are there any strategies for the reflection and adjustment piece? This person that asked the question uses journaling, but wondering if you have some specific tips and tricks.
So here at the process, after our sessions, we have people close their eyes and take a breath in the same way that at yoga, you would do a shavasana at the end of a session, which is there in order to kind of settle in, like, what did I actually do to my body? I think that has a lot of value when it is the end of a focused work session, because, again, we are so tempted, I think, because we have this kind of cult of productivity in America, to think, I got to move on to the next thing. And I'm guilty of it too. I will think, okay, I got to go check my email. I got to see if I have any texts. I got to go on Twitter and see if anybody has done anything that I need to pay attention to, which goes back to that idea of, historically, more information was always good information, right? Like, if we were information starved as a group of cave people, we would always be looking for information. But now we have too much information. So the trick becomes, how do you carve out these little pockets of reflection to just note, hey, I did this thing that was difficult. Now I'm going to do just a couple of moments to celebrate that. One of the ways that I do this is that I have 3 playlists on my computer of guilty pleasure songs on Spotify. And after a decent or even bad focused work session, I get to just play any of them. I don't have to think about, like, oh, I want to save that song for the right moment. It's just click play this song. It makes me happy. I don't care if it's Mudvayne or DMX, whatever I need in that moment, to allow myself to just stop and pay attention to how do I actually feel now that I did that thing that I was probably dreading a little bit. This, I think, comes back to that idea of the guilt and shame that people feel, because they're thinking all the time, I got to race off to the next thing, instead of being able to sit still for a moment, take a breath, listen to the DMX song, pay attention to how you feel, celebrate that, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Okay, if you'll humor me, there's 2 questions that I'm going to give you that kind of lead into each other. The first one is, what do they teach you as an athlete to get that focus?
So some of it is that you're figuring it out yourself. In fact, a lot of it is that you're figuring it out yourself. I mentioned that I learned that free throw routine from a guy named Bob Chipman, who taught me in Lee Arena when I was 12 years old, that we all needed a way to switch from the chaos of a basketball game to the relative solitude of a free throw. So you're playing a game at high speed, and then suddenly everything stops, which is why that ritual becomes so important. But the reality is that it is mostly self-driven, and it's the people who can figure out how to, in the parlance of our times, regulate their nervous systems so that they can calm down enough to play a basketball game in front of thousands of people in the stands and another few million on TV. And some people just aren't able to do that. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of discussion about how to do that. At least there wasn't when I played. I think more and more people are cottoning on to how important that is. If you think about how baseball players work, pitchers are notoriously weird. They have all sorts of superstitions that I would actually argue are more like rituals that they go through in order to get themselves into a position where they can go out and in front of 40,000 people deliver a 99-mile-an-hour fastball into a 1 foot by 2 foot window. That's really difficult, and we can kind of understand that. With other sports, it's a little harder. I've actually reversed engineered this thanks to some help in other arenas of my life. For a while, doesn't matter, but I moved to LA to make a TV show once, and I had an acting coach because they thought they needed to teach me how to act. And she taught me a lot that I sort of retrospectively applied to my basketball career about presence, about taking little breaths before you get into situations that are a lot for you. And I think that has a lot to say about this same stuff, like treating these little bouts of focus with some degree of sacredness. Like, we are understanding that it is difficult, that there is a challenge ahead. And so therefore we take it seriously and treat it with this kind of ritualistic approach.
This isn't the second question, but how much worse did free throws become when they created those really loud things that my intern used to walk by my office all the time?
Your intern was basically testing your ability to focus. I like it.
Yes, it was, a joy of working for an NBA team that other people don't get to experience.
I will say that the experience of shooting free throws or even playing basketball in America pales in comparison to the experience of playing in Europe. So I also played for 3 teams in Spain and 1 in Greece and 1 in Russia. And often in, especially the Greek leagues, fans would bring Roman candles into the arena and shoot them at the opposing fans across the court, which really tests your ability to focus.
Yeah. So, okay, thank you for that. And then we're going to just end with this one that was the actual second parter. So ultimately, was the process born of your experience with the writing community and foundationally informed by being an athlete that then helped you realize that it applied to business, or did it really come out of the writing community?
That is a good question. And shout out to somebody who's not here at all. My friend Mike and I were at breakfast one time in Los Angeles while I was in the midst of running the writing space. And he said, kind of out of the blue, he's like, "Oh, what you're doing isn't just for writers. It's for all creatives, freelancers, entrepreneurs." At the time, so remember that I started doing this in 2013. In this last 12 years, we have seen this proliferation of more entrepreneurial mindsets, the ability, the infrastructure, like with Lettuce, that provides people with the opportunity to do this stuff. Like, for a long time, it wouldn't even have been possible. So that's why we see all of these people on their laptops at coffee shops, because it's not just writers and creatives, it's entrepreneurs and freelancers and people who want to do something on the side. So it started with me understanding, it's writers that need this, because that was my world immediately after basketball. And then it evolved, in part thanks to Mike, but in part because a lot of people were coming to our space not writing at all, doing all sorts of other things, that we recognized, we got to kill the writing aspect and move it to something that's open to all sorts of people who need a respite from the distraction, who need the community, who need the accountability of a deadline. Because, like Ron was saying at the very beginning of this, when you're in a company, you often have a lot of these exterior demands, which may be annoying, but they do give you a box to work in. When you're on your own, whether it's something creative or it's something entrepreneurial, you don't have that box anymore. And that's why you need the accountability, the structure, and most important, I think, the community of other people who are around you, who you can commiserate with, who you can talk about strategies that do work and don't work, and adapt over time through that community.
I mean, the perfect way to end, because we have hopefully given everyone that today, both in the insights and expertise from our speakers. And so we're going to wrap it up there. And then we also know that everyone's been connecting with each other in those Google Sheets and in the chat, and we hope that that continues. So I'm going to end with a thank you to Paul for his time and expertise. A thank you to Ron for creating this space for all of us and creating Lettuce. I encourage all of you to check us out and keep in touch at lettuce.co. And we, might be back for another solo summit another time soon. But thank you to everyone in attendance today. It's been a really good day. We felt the energy, and we hope it continues as you work on your annual plans for 2026.
Thanks, everybody.